Hurford spent time in the Australian Army, 6 years, and he wasn't deployed once. Does that make him any less a serviceman? Does that mean that his contribution is any less valuable? Think Uncommon has a Anzac Day special for 2026. I will be interviewing 3 people, Darren, Jared, and Adam, coming from 3 different perspectives based on military service, military history, and military experience, with a view to taking a look at the uncommon man, what he endures, why he endures it, and of course, some of the stories so we can understand why our men and women choose to serve. Please enjoy these 3 sessions. They have been put together so that we can take a moment to not just represent, but pause and understand our men and women who give their lives, their time, their sacrifice of their relationships and their health in some instances, so that we can stand here every day and enjoy the spoils of a free country. Welcome to the special edition of the Think Uncommon podcast. Over the next 3 episodes, we are going to be featuring the Anzac Code. And we are here today with Darren Hurford. Nice to meet you, Darren.
You too, Jo. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. Darren, what I wanted to do in this mini-series is to shine a light on some of the uncommon men who are involved with and support our military. With Anzac Day coming up on the 25th of April, and with everything that's going on in our environment right now, our country needs to be reminded of exactly the significance that our military holds. And as a man who had a position enlisted in the Australian Army for about 6 years, I've decided that it would be lovely to have a perspective of not just a man who decided to commit to Army service, but a man who committed for very different reasons.
For sure. Look forward to speaking about it.
What I'd like to start with is simply this. One of the things that makes you unique is the fact that you enlisted a little bit later than normal. So the average age of a man who enlists in the Australian Army is 23 years old, but you weren't 23 when you enlisted.
No, I enlisted at 27 years old. So I'd had a varied sort of life and career and a few different things leading up to that. I was a personal trainer at the time. I was a working and performing musician in Melbourne, and I'd always had this fascination with military, and particularly a particular branch of the military being special forces. And at various points in my life leading up to 27, I had varied successes in both my personal training profession as well as the band. And then in and amongst that was my interest and ability to be close to the military. I sort of gained some friends who were ex-special forces and was training with personal trainers who were in special forces as well. And I got to about 26 years old and realized that if I was going to give myself a shot at this, the time was now. So I had to make the choice between the successful life and band and job that I had versus effectively trading it all in to put everything on black and go all in and follow this dream that I'd had since I was about 13 years old.
I'm so glad you mentioned the phrase all in. It's something that very few people do. You and I both understand that the concept of all in versus the reality of all in is vastly different. When you decided to go in, were you supported?
Yes and no. The partner that I had at the time was supportive when I decided that that was what I was going to do until she broke up with me. It happens.
Sorry, changed my mind.
Yeah. Okay, fair. My dad has a history with the military. Whilst he never enlisted himself, his brother served in Vietnam. He was on deployment there. I believe he was Bravo Company for 6 RAR, I want to say, or potentially even a different battalion. I'm not 100% sure. But then their parents served in the military as well through World War II. So I believe my
Right.
grandmother was in signals and my grandfather was in transport, so he was a truckie. So there's been a military history in my family, and
Mm.
my dad was very proud that I'd finally kind of committed to a career choice. Being a man who was in the insurance and then contracting industry for 40 odd years,
Mm.
coming from that generation where you get one career and you're there until you get a gold watch and told to go. The fact that at 27 years old, I'd finally chosen a path.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was really, really proud. My mum had the usual kind of, uh, you know, concerns that a mother would about her son
Yeah.
enlisting, particularly the state of the world around that kind of 2012, 2013. That was really
There's
uh,
a lot going on back then.
the wild west of Afghanistan and Iraq. So yeah, she was justifiably nervous around that. But my friends were incredibly supportive, which was fantastic.
Makes a big difference, right?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. When I'm literally leaving every single part of my life, I think I enlisted with like $120 in my bank account or something like this. I sold all my drums, all my gear. I think I might have kept the PlayStation, of course, just for whenever I might need it again.
Mandatory.
That's it, exactly. But other than that, I pretty much had sort of not many worldly possessions that I took with me. So I literally traded it all in for this dream and this goal.
Wow. There we go. It's absolutely possible to just roll the dice and see where it lands. I think a lot of people would benefit from that alone because they sit on the fence. I have a saying I use quite often is the longer you sit on the fence, the more splinters you get in your butt. And a lot of people don't go all in. They kind of look over the edge and say, yeah, that'd be nice. And they dip their feet and it gets hard. So they come back to the safe space, but they're not completely engaged over here and they're not completely committed over here. It's constant leaning to one side or the other. And that's definitely no way to live life.
No, you miss too many opportunities, and more importantly, you don't learn anything. Because if you go all in, as I did, and then it didn't work out, I had these tremendous learning experiences, and most of them were pretty awful. But had I not done that,
Mm.
my one of my COs towards the end of my career was always very supportive. I went for two selections under his command. And he and I became quite good friends once he left and I got out of the army, still to this day. And he always said to me, he goes, mate, I'll never deny an application because I never want you guys to die wondering. Provided the
Mm.
battalion is in a position to release soldiers, I don't want you guys to walk out of here because when you're in the army, it's only for a short time, whether it's a 40-year career or it's a 4-year stint. I never want you guys to die wondering about what could have been,
Yeah.
which is something that I still live by to this day.
And I still remember might have been before your time, a Corey Feldman t-shirt
Oh no,
actor. He had a t-shirt that used to say, don't die wondering. And I actually got that t-shirt when I was young. And I used to wear that a lot. And I think I was way beyond my time because people would look at me and go, what on earth does this mean? I'm like, well, it's pretty self-explanatory, isn't it?
yeah, yeah,
Oh, no.
yeah.
Which just goes to show, right, that mentality doesn't belong to the many. It really belongs to the few.
Exactly. Yeah. Look, there's a lot of wisdom, I think, in being able to really see past where you're currently at and plan 2, 3, 4 steps ahead.
Mm.
And that was certainly something that I came up against when I was in the military, enlisting at 27, in amongst the average demographic of 23. And I would even argue that, when I was in basic training and then at infantry school, the demographic there would have been probably younger than that. 18 to
Mm.
21 was pretty standard. So the young boys on the weekends wanted to run amok and do all that sort of stuff and play the reindeer games. I was much more interested in going to just sit in a hotel room and just relax, plan my future, do what I needed to do to try and ensure my success, to
Mm.
the point where I actually got a lot of shtick from the younger kids,
Mm.
because I would have the vision boards, I would have the photographs, I would have the emblems of the units that I wanted to get into on my phone. I was constantly pointed out as like, oh, you might as well get the tattoo, and just ridiculed for stuff like that. But people can only really see at the level that they're at and where their own
Exactly.
consciousness allows them to, So
Yeah.
whilst that was hard to take, it was also kind of like, oh, you don't really understand, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But it was only probably years later that I really started to not so much have compassion, but I guess have understanding of that's where they were at, and they were just doing what they thought was right, which was to put down somebody else for having some ambition. So like
Pack mentality, right? You're the old guy. Grandpa over there wants to stay home.
that's it. It's the loudest that generally will do the least. So I let the boys be loud, and I just kind of worked away on my own.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's perfect meeting them where they're at. But then at 27 years old, you probably didn't have the conscious awareness of what exactly that meant. It was just, you know what, you go and do your thing and I'm going to do my thing and you just be happy over there and I'm just going to be here.
Exactly. Yeah, you do your thing, but you just do it away from me. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, just don't bother me as you go about your business.
Exactly. Yes.
So Darren pre-enlistment, Darren post-enlistment.
Mm.
In the first 6 months, what are 3 key things that changed in you?
Post enlistment.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the first thing was, and one of my really good friends to this day told me he got out probably about 6 months before I did.
Mm-hmm.
I'll change the language to make it family friendly. He said, I need you to remember this when you go to uni, you get a job, you do all these things. I'm like, yeah, cool. He goes, nobody gives two hoots about what you did in the army. Nobody out here cares. Not from a malicious point of view to put you down. They just don't know what it is and it doesn't mean anything to them.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And I had to really adapt to, I guess, keeping my mouth shut because I had wrapped up my whole identity in going for the things that I wanted to in the army. And then
Yeah.
when that didn't pan out, that was still part of my identity. But nobody on the outside knew what those things were. That was probably the first thing of having to come to grips with was that I was in this organization where I had an identity, and whether it was healthy or unhealthy, it was what it was. Getting on the outside and on the other side of that, where I've literally handed back my identification card of now I have no identity, and then going out into the civilian world, being like, I actually have no identity, and the shred of identity that I did have previously, nobody out here knows what that is. So I'm literally a stranger in an unknown land, and yet somehow everything is familiar.
And
So that
not to
was
mention that you probably see it through a very different lens.
correct. Yes, it was definitely an exercise in learning to keep my mouth shut. But look, that was a transition that I think every veteran goes through, is getting on the outside and having been, particularly for combat corps, so infantry, soldiers, engineers, all those sorts of things, getting on the outside and then hearing people complain that it rained today, or it's like I only got 7 hours instead of 8 hours sleep, or a myriad of it. My coffee was cold, or the train, I missed the train. It's like, yeah, I hear that, how that must be really hard for you, and
And you're
just
there going, I did pick it. You have no
just
idea.
shutting up. So that was certainly something. And at that stage, I was 33 years old as well.
Yeah.
And I went back to uni the year after I got out. So I'm dealing with like literally school leavers who are 18 years old,
With no life experience.
zero. And Gen Z's, where everything is TikTok and I don't know, whatever else the young kids had, but it was just kind of learning to just sit back and just observe and just be like, all right, cool, yep, that's happening. Yeah, which was the same, ironically enough, the same position that I was in when I enlisted at infantry school, and that all that was happening. So that's probably the first big thing. The second key difference and thing I needed to adapt to was still it whilst it was a change, but it was also adopting the discipline that I had forged over that time and really accepting that it was still purposeful. I see a lot of professional sports players go from professional sport to commentary or TV or media or whatever, and they really let themselves go and they lose it, lose it, so to speak. but actually going, hey, I was in the military and I had this tremendous sense of discipline beforehand that was sharpened and honed whilst I was in. And now on the outside, there's still purpose in that.
Yes.
It doesn't have to go to the extreme that I took it to when I was in, but it still serves a purpose. So the
It's
first day
still a foundation.
that's just it. So the first day that I was out of the military, I got out on a Tuesday afternoon was my last day. The Wednesday I stayed home and I don't even think I put shorts on. I legitimately think I played video games in my underwear for about a day. I don't think I had a solid meal until that night. I really just like let it all hang out. I had the air conditioning on. I was getting chips in my in my chest hair and everything. I'm just like I just let it all go. I'm like, we're gonna make a concerted effort to get this out of my system. Yeah. The irony that this is called the Uncommon Man podcast is not lost on me. But I'm here. I'm being authentic.
I'm trying to avoid the vision of Homer Simpson right now.
Like, well, look, there's some truth to that. But I made a concerted effort to do that, to get it out of my system. And then I said, right, that was Wednesday. Come Thursday morning, you're sitting down with a notebook. You're going to go to a cafe. You're going to get some breakfast. You're going to get loaded up on caffeine because that's still very much
It's still how you do things.
That's still there, right? And you're going to set out a daily and a weekly structure, right? And I did that, like I did with my military career and for my training schedule, all that sort of stuff. By the hour, it's exactly what I did. What I just allowed myself to do was give myself more free time. So it was 5 a.m. I was awake, 6 a.m. I'd walk the dog, 7 a.m. I was at the gym. By 9 o'clock, I was at a cafe with a book reading for an hour, right? And then from 11 till 12, I was playing drums. I'm still an avid drummer, so I'd practice for a little bit. 12 till 2, I just had free. And I could do whatever I wanted to. I could stare at the ceiling. I could go see a movie. I could do whatever I wanted to. And then the afternoon, I had another practice session for a couple of hours. I'd go to the gym again in the afternoon. And then by 4 or 5 p.m., it was like, right, your day's done. Do whatever you want to do. So having that structure in there and really coming to terms with and accepting that this is still okay. This is still a part of me. This discipline is an asset to me, but I don't have to crank it up to 14.
Right.
So that was a really big change because pre-enlistment, it was I'm going to enlist, I'm going to try out for special forces. So I need to be 38 out of 10 disciplined all the time, that just live life on nitrous, right? But then understanding and seeing from that 30,000 foot view, hey, this has its place in my life, was really, really powerful. The third big change was, and this didn't happen until probably a year or so, probably even 2 years, to be honest, if I'm being really fair, was really being proud of my service. I went in with a very specific goal in mind, which was to, get into special forces. And I didn't achieve that. What was fostered in me, and I think what is very much the culture for the vast majority of particularly infantry and combat corps, is unless you reach the top, you're nothing. And given that my ambition for the job and my identity were conflated with each other, when I didn't get the job, therefore my identity was nothing. And there was no shortage of people in that arena who would remind me of that. And I was in a headspace at the time, which, I believed it. I bought into that. But it wasn't until probably 2 years after I got out that I really started to see, that was a job. And whilst I didn't get the job I wanted to, I'm still very proud of what I did achieve and what I did try. And the fact that I actually signed up and was in service to my country, which, whilst I wanted to kick doors in and fast rope and blow things up and all that sort of stuff, which I think is maybe just an inherent, desire for most men, in a masculine sense, right? I was there ready to serve my country. I signed on the dotted line. I wrote the blank check for my life, and I was prepared to do whatever was asked of me in service of that. So it wasn't until a couple of years afterwards that I really came to terms with being proud of my service, despite the career outcome, so to speak.
I think that lends to a very important point, and really the whole intention of this particular episode is that Just because you don't go on deployment or you are not in one of the arenas that attracts the most attention, that has the most volatile missions, or tends to get the most amount of praise, it doesn't warrant your service or your willingness to serve as anything less.
Correct. Yeah, it
And
doesn't.
nor should it.
No, you're right. It doesn't negate that, and again, as you and I have both seen from the various circles that we hang out in, there is a culture, and I think it's unfortunately rife in this country, of tall poppy syndrome. So it doesn't matter if you attempted, it only matters if you got there. The irony in that is whether you attempted and you failed or you got there and you're up there, there's still too many people who are more than ready, willing, and able to want to cut you down. And that's certainly what I experienced. And there was definitely a lot of support in there from, my friends and various, personnel and staff in the army. But that kind of need to look at what somebody is doing or has done or hasn't done, it can be quite toxic, and it really does affect people. It is a very lonely journey trying to achieve anything at a high level, whether that's training for a selection, whether it's being an operator in teams, whether it's building a business, whatever. Success is a very, very lonely road. So the people who are either not cut out for it, tried and failed themselves and got, triggered when somebody else was successful or tried to do it, or have just generally not been interested in extending themselves, my experience is that they're the ones that are really ready to kind of throw shade, and they're not the ones in the arena. They're not the man in the arena. So being, I guess, just being okay with that and going, hey, this is a lonely road, I think is also a really big takeaway from my time in the service too.
I do like the Roosevelt quote in relation to being in the arena. Brené Brown refers to it, and it is for the same reasons one of my favourites, because at the end of the day, realistically, if you're not in the arena, you really do not have any opinion that's worth any value for anyone who is in the arena to stop and listen to, let alone heed or potentially shift as a result of.
Correct. Yeah, look, you can go to any comment section on any intelligent Facebook post and get a very clear.
I think that's an oxymoron. Intelligent Facebook post that it says me who puts Facebook posts up. So leadership. I know that you are huge on leadership. It's a really big deal for you. It's one of your core values is being able to lead with integrity. How does that play out when you're in the army and you are in what you have referred to as ready battalion status? When we chatted briefly, you mentioned that you actually said no and declined deployment to Afghanistan so that you could go for selection a third time, but that you also spent a significant amount of time in ready battalion status. What does that actually mean, and how long can the Army hold you on ready battalion status for?
Yeah. So the way that the Ready Battalion sort of status and rotation works, from my understanding, again, this was 10 years ago, was that there's a battalion that's deployed doing the job, and then there's a backup effectively. So in case everything goes bad, they can push the big red button, and then these guys are good to go within 24 hours notice to move. Okay. Then there's another battalion that is getting ready to be ready. Okay. Then there's ones that have just come off deployment, so they're in rest and recover. They will generally get a lot of the infills from the training organizations, right? Because there's usually a lot of people wanting to get out after the deployment. And then there's one that is just kind of like training up and doing the exercises and qualifying and all that sort of stuff. From memory, we were the Ready Battalion for 12 months. So that meant that we had a very stringent leave boundary. So we were not allowed to be more than about 2 hours outside of Brisbane. We had all our kit ready to go. So we had 2 or 3 spare changes of clothes. We had a spare 2 uniforms, spare boots, literally a whole kit packed and ready to go in our storage, in our gear cages. And intermittently, once every however often the CO decided to, we would get random calls in the middle of the night going, right, we're simulating a big red button push.
So you'd be drilled.
Yeah. So we would kind of know that it was coming. Our team commanders would be like, hey guys, leave your phones on loud tonight. And we're like, oh, okay, cool. So 11 p.m., 2 a.m., we'd get the phone call. We had to go into work, and basically the timer would start from the phone call, and then the timer would finish once the CO came out and was given the all clear, already good to go kind of thing. And we rehearse that and drill that. So that went on for about 12 months. In that time, there was a significant kind of holding on to the people in the battalion. So nobody was allowed to go on extended holidays. I missed both of my best friends' weddings, to which I was the best man. One was in Sydney, one was in Bali. I was not allowed to go to those, and I had, before the decision was made, I had to submit basically an itinerary and a roadmap and a run sheet and a plan of, hey, if we call you, how are you going to get back within 24 hours? And I had to be looking up flights from Bali or to and from Sydney. I had to look up how much an Uber was going to cost, distance, timings, travel. Like, I had to do the full workup, all for the CO at the time to be like, yeah, I see this, thanks, mate, but sorry, denied,
No.
And just the general kind of, I guess, being a little bit on edge, not from, is something going to kick off overseas? Because at that point in time, things were really kind of winding down, but more from the, okay, how are the rank going to try and kind of test us for something that we already feel like we're ready for? So that kind of heightened state of nervousness was present for about a year. With regards to, passing up the deployment, my company was going over to Taji, which was in Iraq at the time. And it was my potential third attempt at selection. So I went for selection for 2 Commando in 2014, then 2016. And then this time around, I was going for SASR. And I'd already submitted my application. My application had been approved, but my chain of command, they were doing about a month of lead up training, maybe 2 months. And the company sergeant major, who I'm now good friends with, and the company commander brought me into their office for a very informal chat, and they said, "Hey, mate, look, being one of the senior soldiers, one of the more experienced guys here, we're going to give you the option. You can withdraw your application for SASR selection, and you can come on the deployment. We'll slot you into a team, and you're good to go. Happy to have you. If you want to go for selection, we'll support that 100%. We'll shield you from all the stuff we need to do. We'll basically make you and whoever else is going for our company an island, and then like you have time to train and do your thing." So in that, I chose to go for selection again. I was 30, 31 or 32 at the time, I believe. And I knew that I really only had one more in me. I think from both a mental and a physical point of view, I had a little niggle in my neck, which most infantry soldiers will have in their neck or their back or their knee or their shoulder, which turns out to warrant 2 or 3 surgeries over the course of about as many years. And again, like a good infantry soldier, it was like, it's fine. I'll just ignore that. So I knew that if I did the trip and then I came back, I would have to sort of retrain up again. I'd be a year, 18 months older at that point.
Yes.
I still had the fire, and I wanted to take advantage of that whilst it was there. And I definitely feel like I made the right choice, because the deployment from all accounts was not what the guys had wanted. They weren't necessarily under the rank and the command of our rank. So they were kind of detached from our unit and put in under command of like a cavalry unit, artillery unit.
Right.
And they were treated fairly poorly. There was also not much to do. It was effectively a security trip. So they kind of went over there. They got the medal, they got the deployment pay, and they got to see a different part of the world and do the job, so to speak.
Yeah.
And then they came home, and then there was just a massive rate of discharge from the battalion. And from my understanding, it was abnormally large, to the point where the boffins in Canberra were kind of like, "What's going on at 6RAR over there?" So and that was to do with the leadership at the time as well. So I was very fortunate in that I, was respected enough by the rank to be brought in and have a mature adult conversation and be given some freedom in that to make that choice, which wasn't afforded to everyone.
Understandably not. You talk about leadership, and it makes sense when we're talking about servicemen and women that leadership is actually everywhere. But there are different types of leaders. Sometimes you can find yourself under the command of someone that you have very little to no respect for, and you see them taking part in things or hear of rumors of them taking part in things which are not congruent to the type of leadership that you would expect to find in any organization, let alone one that has such a sense of honor and tradition associated with it. How do you manage that being a soldier who is supposed to take orders without questioning?
Yeah. So I like to make a distinction. There's the leader and then there's the guy in charge. I've been under the command of plenty of guys who've been in charge, right? So they are a platoon commander, they are a company commander, they are a battalion commander. Then I've been under the command of some leaders. These are the people who have a knack, whether it is by osmosis or by being born that way or by an immense amount of study and experience, who genuinely lead the people that they are in charge of. And to me, that's what leadership is. It is being responsible for the people in your charge. You know, I have a dog. I am the dog's leader because I am responsible for every bit of behavior and everything that he does. You know, I have a business. I am responsible for that. I'm that business's leader because I'm responsible for every single thing that happens. And what I need to do, whilst also being in charge of what happens, I need to steer that ship and I need to do it in integrity with what is for the best outcome of what I see fit for that business and for the people that it impacts. So being under the command of somebody who is purely there to serve their own career advancement was very difficult. That was a period of probably about 18 months to 2 years where I had a platoon commander who just didn't like the cut of my jib for whatever reason. And I think it was because I was a little bit older. I garnered a lot of respect from the people who were the team leaders who'd been in for 10 plus years, the sergeants who'd been in for 15 to 20 plus years. And then along comes a platoon commander who's been around for 5 years or so.
Mm.
And by rank or by virtue or simply by the whole, I'm better than you, just didn't appreciate the fact that I was able to and had the quote unquote goal to knock on the sergeant's door and say, hey, Sarge, this is actually happening right now. I've got a suggestion for how we might be able to make this better. Because apparently a private soldier, the lowest of the low ranks, shouldn't be suggesting any type of good idea. That is up to the sergeant, that is up to the platoon commander. And when things like that happen to a platoon commander and then somebody above him notices, he takes that personally. And then, as we say in the army, poop rolls downhill. So I was the one to wear the brunt of that. So how did I deal with that? I had to learn to play the game. I had to learn, and the first part of this, and this is one of the key points that I live my life by, is acceptance. Okay, this is the situation that I'm in.
Mm-hmm.
This guy hasn't necessarily got it in for me, but he just, anything I do or say, I'm going to get under the heat lamp for. This is the situation. Let's just accept this. Then I had to learn how to, for want of a better term, play his game and make him think that it was in his best interest, whatever it was that I wanted. Now, I'm not talking about strategy and how we're going to conquer the problem in the Middle East here. I'm just talking about going, hey, rather than, getting the team to do this, this, and this, why don't we get them to do this, this, and this, and it's going to achieve the same outcome, but it's going to yield a better result given the personalities and the dynamic of the team.
And what you're actually talking about is utilization of neuroscience in relation to communication.
It's, it's definitely, it's deployment of assets, it's understanding the team and the personalities that you have, which is leadership. It's being responsible for understanding who you have in your charge and how to get the absolute best from them to achieve your outcome. The fact that I was able to see that from a ground level and he wasn't, but I was the one coming up with the ideas, was where the friction was. So I was a good little soldier and I would keep my mouth shut and I would, and play the game. And there were times when I just had to grin and bear it, so to speak. But then always coming back to, I signed up for this. I signed up to be in the service of my country. Now, whether I trusted that person or not, thankfully, I was never in a life and death situation with them. But whether I trusted that person to lead me to the right outcome or not, this was the situation. I had to follow that leadership. In that, I could kind of massage and move around the things that would serve me and my team better. Without them kind of knowing, because a person like that who isn't a leader but is in charge tend to be upward focused as opposed to downward focused. So they're not necessarily what's called in servant leadership. They're not looking down at the team and going, how can I best hold and support them to achieve my outcome and the outcomes of the higher ups? They're looking upwards at their own career progression. How can I look really good for these people so that I can be where they are?
So you just become assets to propel their career.
Exactly. Correct. Which is, again, acceptance. Okay, I'm literally a chess piece here. Okay, this is where we're at. It's going to be a year. It's going to be 2 years. Let's try and make the best of it.
And also, I'm guessing the acceptance of the fact that if you want to change your influence, you need to therefore change your rank.
Yeah, look, there's no real ability to kind of do that at that level from private to then Lance Corporal. Once I get to Corporal, then you kind of are allowed to speak, so to speak. You get more input. But then I've also had platoon commanders where they would turn to me and be like, hey, you've been here a while. What do you think? And there's a way to go about doing that as well, obviously with a great amount of respect, but also like, yeah, boss, this is what I think, but ultimately it's the leader's decision that sticks, whether I'm allowed input or not. If I'm in a position of, whilst I have autonomy and integrity, if I'm not in a position of making the decision, then all I get to do is put in my 2 cents, given my experience, and then allow that person to, and have trust in their ability to be responsible for me and whoever it is that's under my charge.
So it's an interesting situation to be in, that you're asked for your opinion, where you know that at the end of the day, regardless of your opinion, you will follow whatever you're told to do because they are the commanding officer of your unit at that particular time.
That's just it. Exactly. And look, I've had commanding officers who would say, this is what we're going to do. And everyone's like, oh, yeah, okay. Well, look, I'm in the army, I'm an infantry soldier, so this is what I have to do. And then I've had other COs where I was like, yeah, cool. Like you want us to swim in a river of mud? Yeah, cool. No worries. Like we got it. Yeah, sure. That's what we do. So it really does come down to the respect of the leadership. And I think garnering respect from the leadership comes from the evidence that they've shown us of, hey, I'm actually here with your best interests at heart. I have a job to do higher up. I've got people looking down on me to execute and orchestrate some things, but I am in servant leadership to you. I need to give you the things that you need to be able to help me achieve my end, as opposed to I'm in charge, do what you're told, and then I'm going to go and look higher up and go, look how good of a manager that I was.
It's interesting when we start talking about leadership, we really start having conversations about motivations and drive, whether the person is genuinely interested in a broader picture, whether their primary focus is their team, whether you become a bunch of assets that are utilized to propel them forward, whatever the role is and what you are required to do, that person will have an idea in their mind of how you are a part of the broader picture.
Correct. Yeah. Look, so much of that is personality based as well. And again, it really comes down to whether that person is interested in propelling their career and all they're going to do is use the assets at their disposal, or they are interested in genuinely leading and serving the people and being responsible for the people in their charge. So it really does come down to personalities.
It doesn't look like the military has been something that's really left your blood, for lack of a better term. So when you left the military and you stepped into civilian life, you took on another project. You initiated a business that runs what I refer to as military simulations.
Correct, yeah.
Where people who are everyday civvies get to experience a semi-military environment for a period of time. What made you decide to start that?
It is not enough just to survive.
So what I wanted to do was give people a simulated portion of Special Forces selection. So we started running section with gym events where we would just simulate 2 to 2.5 hours of a gut check style PT session, but we would do it in the energy and the attitude of a directing staff or a DS on selection. So there was no kind of like, come on, let's go and do all this. It was effectively like, you're here because you said you wanted to be here and you wanted to be challenged. Now I'm going to hold you to account for that, right? So I wanted to kind of simulate that, but the point of difference was that I wanted to have effectively a personable debrief at the end of that to understand what was going on in people's heads. This was the thing that I was never really afforded at the end of my Special Forces selections, which was, hey, what's going on for you? How are you feeling, for want of a better term? What are some of the things that are coming up for you? I had to kind of fumble my way through that growth period on my own after I came off my third Special Forces selection. What I wanted to do was create a container for people to have those realizations that only a certain level of pressure and compression can bring to the surface. There is a necessary level of that to really dive through the kind of the mask that we have and the surface level stuff. The old like, oh yeah, no, I'm fine. Oh yeah, I had a few things going on, but nah, it's all good. But when you've been constantly told for anywhere from 2 to 3 hours that what you're doing is not good enough and you need to change this and I'm going to make you do that again, the goalposts keep shifting. It starts to mess with people's heads, and the inner voice, or what I call the voice in the dark, starts to come out, which is, why am I doing this? I don't need to be here. I'm already signed up to this gym. What am I doing this flog fest for? And then that voice kicks in of, you're always underprepared. You're never actually doing good enough. You said you were going to do something like this 6 months ago with that Spartan race, the 24-kilometer Spartan race, and you didn't. You're always pulling out of things. You're never really committing, right? So what I wanted to do was bring that stuff to the forefront and go, where else is this kind of showing up? Where else are you feeling like you're lacking in your composure or your leadership? And a lot of the times what we would get from people is at home. I'm yelling at my kids far too often, or I'm not paying enough attention to my partner, or yeah, I did say I was going to do that. I was going to lose that 10 kilos 6 months ago, or I did say I was going to get really, really fit, or whatever it was. So I wanted to give people those experiences in a compressed amount of time with facilitation that I kind of had to bounce my way off the walls and sort of work out for myself. And that then evolved into obviously what we do now, which is the bigger, larger experiences.
What is the main thing that you see as a result of people who attend an event like that? I imagine that there are people that come in with preconceived notions of what the event's going to be like. They have projections on what they expect they're going to experience. And then more often than not, I'm thinking they probably get hit pretty hard in the face of the reality of what they've signed up for. And that decision, that voice in the dark, I imagine it probably shows up quite a few times after they have that initial moment of, oh, wow, this is actually more than I thought it was.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and look, we simulate a 14 and a 24-hour event, both in Australia and the US, respectively. And we start the event with that shock of capture, so to speak, because we want people to be hit with that immediately to get those feelings there, but then show them how to actually operate in that adrenalized state. So if we hit them with it early, then they're going to become more used to it being like, okay, yep, that voice is there. I just spent the last hour overcoming that. And in that, and they've given themselves a win. They've experienced that shock of capture, the whole, oh, heck, like this is not what I signed up for, or I didn't think it was going to be this hard straight away. How the hell am I going to last the next 13 hours or 23 hours? But then when they overcome that, we actually kind of hold that mirror up and go, hey, you just did this. So for the next little while we keep presenting you with these challenges, just know that you've got that first win in the bank. So it is possible. So anything that you decide to do or not do after this, just have a look back at that first experience. And what we see from people is them looking back on the whole experience and going, I never thought I could, should, or would do something like that. I legitimately thought I was cooked after the first hour or 2 hours. And the sheer volume of things that I've done, achieved, and overcome in the past 14 or 24 hours is more than I ever thought possible.
Do you think people underestimate their capacity?
100%. People are only as strong as they allow themselves to be. If they do not, take the gym for example. If you're consistently squatting 60 kilos, that's as strong as you'll ever be. The way we get stronger is by putting more and more pressure on ourselves to force adaptation, right? That is how strength works. Physical strength, mental strength, emotional strength, intellectual strength. If all you do is your times tables, you're never going to be any good at algebra. You need to do the things that are uncomfortable by definition, because that is where your comfort zone expands. So I think really understanding that as a concept and allowing themselves to be in that space where it's going to be challenging, and then looking at the sheer volume of expansion that they had gives them a perspective. And what we see consistently as well is then all of a sudden people raising the standard. There's no more, I don't feel like going to the gym today. There's, hey, I was getting hosed in the face, barked at by a dog, shot at with simulated rounds, and yelled at by 13 complete strangers who were just terrifying at 2 a.m. whilst it was 4 degrees outside. Yeah, you know what? Like, I can go for an extra walk today.
It's really about understanding what we're capable of by putting ourselves in positions where we're fully extended way past something that we would have considered pushing ourselves towards, which really lends weight to the benefits of experiences like that, where, much like you did with the army, you just pay for it, go all in, whatever it is, and say, right, having that whatever it takes mentality. I know that one of the things that they recommend when you go into special forces training and you go into selection is just make it to the next stage, make it to the next stage, just make it to the next. And it's that small goal, make it to the next small goal, to the next small goal. And before you know it, you've got a litany of small goals that you've already met, because you broke it down into something that was bite-sized chunk as opposed to Mount Everest. Suddenly it felt like it was achievable.
Yeah. It's that micromanaging of yourself and your own emotions and physicality as well. There was always a joke on selection where it was like 3 days in, and then some of the guys, on a 16 or a 21-day selection, 3 days in, they'd be like, hey, only 2 more sleeps till the end of selection. It was that concept of like, yeah, we've had 2 good nights sleep, we're going to be awake for the next 2 weeks. But that's exactly what they do on selection. It's what we do with our programs as well is, we give you that shock of capture fast. So it's like, how the hell am I going to make it through the rest of this? It's 3 days into selection. I've slept once. I've already lost 2 kilos. I'm exhausted. How am I going to make it 21 days? This is absurd, and that's the point, is to get those people's focus on just make it to the next meal timing. Okay, this is a PT session. We're going to be here for at least 2 hours, 3 hours. Let's just do what we can do to that point. At some point it will end, and if we're here for the next week doing push-ups, so be it. At some point my arms are going to stop working, and then they know this, they're humans as well. But being in that position, and people come to us in a weird kind of way, almost to be forced into that position, because it can be really hard to do it themselves. People go to the gym, they do CrossFit, they do strongman, powerlifting, whatever it is that they do, and they're highly capable of really redlining themselves. But the basic human instinct is for comfort and protection, right? So it takes a special kind of person to walk into something and go, I'm actively going to hurt myself. But people understand that it's only on the other side of that they get these tremendous results and these breakthroughs. So it's much easier to go, hey, I'm willing to do this and I want you to help facilitate it. And that's what we do.
And that's what Jordan Peterson says, the only way out is through, right? Goggins says the same thing. You quit and you're really only 40% there, but unless you push past it, you'll never know.
That's it. Don't die wondering.
Don't die wondering. And I think that's one of the biggest problems we have at the moment is not only do people not want to push themselves past it, they hit that piece of resistance, that little bit of discomfort. Oh, I think I've hurt myself. Oh, that hurts a little bit more than I wanted to. I'm going to back off today, maybe tomorrow, maybe tomorrow. And as you and I both know, tomorrow never comes.
That's it. There's that old adage of, F around and find out. It's like, oh, you think you're injured? Okay, sure, maybe. Are you willing to get injured to achieve the goal? In the gym, in a CrossFit comp, maybe not so much. But in life, or I need to get fit, or I need to do this, I need to do that. Try it. It may be a story in your head. And
it really comes back to purpose, right? Because at the end of the day, if you're driven by a purpose bigger than yourself, then things that would stop other people won't stop you because you're driven towards that end goal of achieving that purpose. And that pull towards that mission is way bigger than any discomfort that you'll experience along the way.
Correct. Yeah, there needs to be a pull towards something because that's forward focused. If it's a drive away from something, then it's constantly looking back. And then you see all the things that are slowing you down, getting in your way, might stop you, but being forward focused is like, yeah, I've got an injury or I've got a distraction. That's behind me. Whatever. I'm going this way.
I love the concept of impermanence. It actually gives us a lot of freedom once we understand how to apply it.
Yeah, absolutely. Agreed.
One final thing before we wrap up. You're a man that spent 6 years in the army, didn't get to deploy, but was ready for a significant period of time. You were trained up the whole time. You were a serviceman and you chose the infantry. Now that you're a civilian, we've got Anzac Day coming up. What would you like as a man who's dedicated his time to service for civilians in Australia to know and to do to demonstrate respect for the role that the military plays?
We were and are prepared to do the things that most don't want to do for zero congratulations and even zero acknowledgement. And we would do it again in a heartbeat, but because not necessarily because we believe in any sort of accolade or necessarily sense of purpose, but because we believe in a right to our way of life. And there are things that the general population don't know, and nor should they, but we are prepared to know. We are prepared to take on so that they don't have to. And I think it's important to understand that we would gladly do it, not for recognition, but just for respect. And particularly as a man, that is our currency. We deal in respect. Doesn't have to be laying out the red carpet parades in the streets, but there is something so powerful in just a thank you. It's not big in this country. In fact, the Australians, 9 out of 10 are really feel uncomfortable when people say thank you for your service. But I spent a lot of time in the US, and it is tremendous over there, absolutely tremendous. And there is something so heartwarming and respectful about that.
Yeah.
That being around, the Anzacs and servicemen and women on Anzac Day, and just recognizing the sacrifice that they've made, not necessarily with blood or sweat, but in time, in relationships, in money, in sleep, all of those things to uphold a standard of life for this incredible country.
Perfect. Well said. Absolutely well said. And I think that you're spot on, because people do struggle to say thank you because they feel awkward saying thank you. They think that's going to open up a conversation they don't know how to have, so they avoid it. And I know myself, having been to Anzac Day marches for the last decade, I watched the numbers decrease to the extent where I actually saw a march cancelled because no one showed up.
Mm.
And that was absolutely heartbreaking to see that, because I would never have thought in a million years that in a country where the military plays such a significant role that we'd forget and we'd become complacent and entitled.
I don't think anyone's forgotten. It's impossible to forget that day. I think there's been an active choice, and it's for fear of judgment. So much of people's indecision or decision to avoid is from a fear of judgment, because there's no consequences to saying thank you or thank you for your service. There's no consequences to go to an Anzac Day march, but there's a fear of judgment of how am I going to be perceived and what might be the fallout from that. I have a feeling this year, though, particularly for the servicemen and women, given the current political and social climate that's going on, I have a feeling this Anzac Day is going to be overwhelmingly supported by a lot of veterans.
I hope so. I really do. That would be great to stand on the streets of Sydney watching the Anzac Day march go for longer, because we have more of our veterans showing up. I think that would definitely be a success.
For sure.
Absolutely. Well, Darren, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for your service. Appreciate you just sharing your message with us today. And as a member of the Uncommon Men Think Uncommon podcast, thank you for everything that you do in your civilian life as well, because you've taken not just who you are, but the lessons that you've learned in service, and you've applied them back into the civilian world so we all can benefit from it.
Thank you, Joe. It was a real pleasure. Thanks for having me.